Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. It's Wednesday, July 1st, 2026, episode 535, and we're going to talk about a hodgepodge of things: world events, Europeans visiting the United States, and global racialization. All right, so this episode is going to try to be a little bit on the lighter side, or at least using a lighter situation to talk about more serious things. And I've been pretty much trying to stay away from a lot of the major headlines only because they change so frequently. What's actually happening and what is not so clear, and everyone always disagrees with um, other people's takes. But for me, the way I look at things is I look for people who are insiders and avoid those people who generally are recognized as being simply mouthpieces of the state, of the government. In other words, you're going to hear a lot of the propaganda from mainstream news sources, and in the alternate podcast world, you're going to hear information all over the board, and I'm going to give you a taste of that today. So it's obvious that the war is still going on in the Middle East between Iran and the United States and Israel. And the United States is in a hopeless spot. It's unable to, hurt Iran in such a way that it will capitulate. I already mentioned, I think, that Trump had signed a surrender document, the Memorandum of Understanding, and then proceeded to break it because he didn't like it. It's just a strange thing. There's no oil. The flow of oil has been shut off out of the Persian Gulf, and there's no way to change that. Oman and Iran both are proceeding with negotiations on how to control the Strait of Hormuz moving forward. In other words, charging tolls. And there's nothing that the United States can really do about that, especially since the Strait of Hormuz is within the territorial waters of Oman and Iran. And if you are of the camp that believes that you can't uh, charge tolls on so-called straits that countries all over the world use, well, Turkey does it. And apparently, one or two other countries might do something like that as well. So, if there's no flow of oil, why hasn't the gas prices in the United States spiked? And it's because Trump is continuing what Biden had done, manipulating the price of gasoline by dipping into the strategic petroleum reserve that we have in Oklahoma. But that's coming to an end, right? We're running out, and estimates differ in terms of how much time is left, for anywhere between a couple of weeks to uh, 4 weeks, but it's running out. And since there's no oil coming in, they can't restock the storage there. Now, the United States, and if you haven't realized by now, the United States is not used to fighting a country that can shoot back. There was a story that's unconfirmed, of course, but there's a story floating around in the podcast world that at least 12 F-35s were caught on the ground and destroyed on the ground. That is huge. I mean, they're terrible as plane war machines, but they are very expensive. If one is in this kind of situation where there's the oil has stopped flowing, then you're going to look for alternatives, alternate sources of the oil. I don't know what those sources would be, but I said right from the very beginning that, probably not on the podcast, but in church, that the first thing, if I was a leader in Korea, the first thing I would do is immediately look for an alternate source of fuel, because my people are more important than foreign policy. right? That's who you were elected to serve, which is what a lot of people in America believe. But clearly, politicians in DC function on a with a different rule book. Also, to continue with the depressing news, in other words, the US is losing badly. The losses suffered by the United States military is off the charts. I don't think they've ever suffered so many losses, from drones to planes to tankers to fighters to fighter bombers, to casualties to air base, military facilities, radar, all of that stuff destroyed, going in the billions and billions of dollars. In addition to the fact that anti, what do you call it, sort of Iron Dome type defenses, anti-missile missiles, right? So when Iran shoots drones or missiles at Israel or US bases or even US ships, can they stop them? And the answer is no. I saw a report. Daniel Davis interviewed this MIT professor who basically is saying that the military and the military industrial complex, is lying to us about how effective Patriot missile batteries, anti-missile missiles, how effective they are, that they're not 90% effective like all the propaganda says, but it's more like 5%. 5%. They only stop 5% of incoming projectiles, and that a lot of the statistics are fudged and worked in such a way that they're going to claim 90%. Well, if it's only 5% effective, why are we spending so much money? It's like having no protection at all. So just think if it was birth control, 5% effective. Okay, well, that's essentially no protection. So why are we spending so much money? It's obvious that the propaganda is lying to us so that certain people can continue to make more money and give people the false perception of security. Yeah, but it's just simply not the case. In addition to that, the war in Ukraine is still going on. My wife told me yesterday that there was a coup attempt in Ukraine, and I thought, wow, it's about time. But then I thought about it, and I looked online to see if anyone else was talking about it other than redacted. And it seems like it's a false flag. It's just something that the Ukrainians did to themselves to generate more sympathy and perhaps more donations, funds from appropriations from the United States, more money from the United States. And I heard something too, I think you probably already know if you're listening to this channel, but apparently a lot of the money that is sent to the Ukraine are then funneled into other projects like real estate in Dubai, and then they flip the properties, and the profits from those sales go to Israel and to members of Congress here in the United States as kickbacks and bribes. And so, in other words, they're cleaning the money and then paying people off. And that explains why, in spite of the fact that the Ukraine conflict and the war against Iran are hugely unpopular, why Congress continues to go to support, moves in the direction to support both conflicts, right? Because they're making money hand over fist. I don't know who, but it doesn't surprise me, especially since the Epstein list is still quote unquote secret. And I heard someone say that every member of Congress who voted in favor of releasing the names from the Epstein file and who was up for reelection lost their bid for reelection, which is funny in a very sick, dark kind of way. So the coup attempt in Ukraine, I mean, think about it, the kinds of things that are going on in the Ukraine. I would imagine that a lot of the soldiers, there would be enough people who would try to stage a coup. And I'm surprised it didn't happen already. Maybe it's because Zelensky is nowhere to be found, that all of his appearances are a very, very secret. And when he goes, quote unquote, home, it's not home, it's some secret location. So it's also it seems to me that if you support Ukraine or if you support Israel, it means that you hate those people in those countries because they're getting slaughtered. Israelis are apparently getting killed at a level that has previously been unknown. Israeli soldiers, especially Israeli equipment, and then the number of Ukrainians that are killed because of this war is just it's just ridiculous. I saw a story this morning where a 5-year-old girl uh, was found alone at her house because her father was kidnapped, right? So there was no one else in the family, and her father was kidnapped to be sent to the front because that's what they do. They Shanghai people off the streets because they need soldiers. But they didn't care the fact that he's the only caregiver for a 5-year-old. Um, it doesn't matter. That's the kind of people that the United States supports, at least the US government supports. And when you look at all of this as a whole, you begin to understand, if you haven't already, the power of hate. You create a racialization, you create a category, and then you portray that category in such a way that all there is hate, and it blinds people. It prevents people from seeing what the repercussions, what the actual cost of that kind of hate is. And they continue to do a lot of harm to society, to countries, to nations, to people all over the world. It's just, it's crazy. Also, if you look at precious metal prices, there's a lot of manipulation in the paper markets, and I'm sure that if you know anything about it, then you know that price is heavily manipulated, and because of all of the betting, so-called, shorts and longs, which I don't really totally understand, because of all that manipulation, you see these wild price swings, in addition to the fact that war affects prices as well. But meanwhile, there are a lot of countries that see the price going down, crashing even, that they're buying record amounts. So China being the number one country that their buying of gold and silver remains steady no matter what the price is, but increases when the price goes down. So, and just so you know, but why does a price crash in the way that it does is because a lot of trading today happens by computer. You preset a sell order. Like if you bought a lot of something and the price of it hits a certain mark, then you either set the algorithm to buy more or to sell. And these preset levels are the same for lots of people because they all use the same algorithm. So if the price were to hit 60, a lot of people sell. And then if a lot of people set their price at 59, then a lot of people sell. And so when the price starts to go down, it hits these sell orders and then it continues to go down. In other words, you get a crash that way until you hit a line where a lot of people had put in buy orders, right? So if it hits this price, then buy a lot, right? And that's when the price stabilizes, at least temporarily. So this is what's going on all over the world. You have countries that are buying and countries that are selling. But the question that a lot of people are asking is, do Western countries, European and American countries, and any country that has a relationship with the United States, do any of them have any precious metals in their banks? Who knows? The United States supposedly has what, like 8,000 tons or something of gold, but there hasn't been an audit in a very long time. So a lot of people believe that there's nothing there. All right, so that's the depressing side of the news. And what I would like to get to is the fact that World Cup is going on right now. And so there are a lot of soccer fans, as we call it in the United States. And a lot of the games are happening in North America. And so there are a lot of Europeans in the United States. And there are a lot of videos where Europeans come to the United States and they are kind of blown away with some of the things that they see here. But before I begin, I want to just say that everything is a comparison. We learn contrast. We understand relative value by comparison. What's good? Well, we have to know what's bad so we know what's good. Like you don't know what's good unless you know what's bad, and vice versa. Thomas Sowell once said, someone asked him how his wife was, like, "Oh, how's your wife?" And Thomas Sowell replied by saying, "Compared to what?" Right? So you can only say the state of something by comparing it with something else. So how's your wife? Compared to what? Compared to your wife, compared to me. So everything is a comparison. And having said that, I never really gave a thought to Europe, European life, Europeans in general, because my focus has always been on Asia. I've been to Asia and the development, which is, off the charts in Asia, how they develop certain things, technologies and approaches and attitudes that just don't exist in the West yet. I told the story of how I had Chinese students who, when they got on the plane in China, they were so excited to come to America because they want to experience American freedom, right? Because they knew that China was oppressive, and so they wanted to come to a free country, and they were shocked at how they felt less free in a lot of areas, aspects of life, especially when it came to censorship of what you can say and what you can't say about certain things. Now, there aren't a lot of videos of Asians coming to America and being totally blown away. There are a lot of cultural differences, which might explain some of that, but also because in many ways, Asians just they don't care about giant food portions, right? I mean, it's not such a big thing, um, but rather, uh, and anything else, well, Asia does it better. So there's not this wow factor that you'll get from Asians when they come to the United States. But Europeans, in contrast, are impressed by Walmart. They're impressed by portion sizes when they go to restaurants. They're impressed by Texas, everything so big there, all the beef that's there, the heat that's there, right? The heat that's in other parts of the country as well. They can't cope with the heat, and that's where a lot of people are then talking about the lack of air conditioning in Europe. Then, I've seen videos on free refills, a variety of choices. It's not just one brand of water, it's like 15 different brands that you want to choose from. So it's just all water. Then pricing is all different as well. And then you get free water at restaurants and some restaurants, certain restaurants anyway. But it's kind of like that with any country that you have not been to. In other words, normal is what you have right now at this moment, listening to me. This is what you have is normal. That's what you are comfortable with. And everything else becomes a comparison. Well, I like it better where in my country, we did this and you do it like this. And so everything becomes a comparison. And depending on your takes, your taste, your likes and dislikes, you're either going to be impressed or disappointed, or you're going to be meh, right? You're just not going to think much of it. Truth be told, there are a lot of parts of America I would never venture. But that's because of my childhood, because of the experience I had when I was younger. There were certain neighborhoods I would not even go near, even if it's kind of safe, just because I know that people see me as Asian. And so For me, back in the day, that meant that people were going to pick on you when you were a child. People were going to bully you when you got older. People are going to try to mug you, things like this. And so, um, as much as certain areas of the United States, yes, are extremely safe, there are certain areas I would never go, even during the daytime. But I think it's more of a statement of Europeans or European freedom than the freedom in the United States. I mean, because I always complain about the level of freedom here in the United States. I complain about a lot of things here in the United States, and that's because I remember what it used to be. And I also know where we're headed, and I don't like it. Europeans must be a lot worse off. That a lot of things that they experience here are so surprising. If you want to get a little deeper, then yeah, some people are going to make commentaries of how uh, the effect of the loss of freedom on Europeans in general, how they've been so, um, how shall I say, dehumanized, turned into sheep. So, that doesn't surprise me at all. But in conclusion, what I think we should remember is that all of it is just simply a racialization. So even the term European, it's a racialization. I mean, there are many different countries in Europe, and there are many different people who live in all of the different countries in Europe. US life, people in the United States, that's also a racialization, a gigantic racialization. You have such a diverse population, yet they're all going to be stereotyped as one kind of person. So, of course, you're going to have lots of surprises and you're going to have validation of stereotypes. But what is really America? What is really European? You have to drill down to the individual. And when you do that, you realize that we share a lot of things in common. So things that are funny uh, are often universal, especially when you get beyond the cultural humor aspect of it. But if you just got down and talked to people, you'll realize that there are more things that we share in common than differences. And that even two countries that are at war with each other, you will find common ground. And then you'll begin to wonder why there is even a war. And you'll realize that it's something entirely different from what the propaganda is saying. And I've talked about movies in the past, how I say that a good war movie is an anti-war movie. There was the movie Enemy Mine, which is an alien movie, but it's that kind of thing where you have aliens who look nothing like human beings. Uh, Louis Gossett Jr. and Dennis Quaid, I think, were the two actors in it. It was way back. But it was trying to illustrate that these two groups, they hated each other. They wanted to murder each other. But then when they were stuck and they needed each other to survive, they begin to realize that they have more in common with each other than um, reasons to hate each other. Joyeux Noel, Merry Christmas is a movie about World War One and the Christmas peace, that if soldiers had the opportunity to talk to each other, then people would be less inclined to fight. In other words, you need the propaganda to stoke all of the hate, to increase the level of hate, so you don't think of the enemy as human beings, which makes it easier to kill them, even their children. And so that's the thing. The takeaway from Europeans visiting the United States. Yeah, a lot of them are surprised because they've been living with a racialization or a stereotypical understanding of the United States. And everyone in the United States, including myself, we exist with stereotypes of Europeans. Not that Americans are really great at geography, but uh, it's all stereotype. And what's more important is getting to know individuals and realizing that what makes us interesting to other people is the fact that we have different life experiences. We come from a different cultural background. And if you want to be disgusted by other people, it's so easy to do that. But if you want to find common ground, it is much easier if you try to give that, if you give that a try. And so that's my takeaway, uh, seeing all these videos. And I am entertained, I have to say, because things which are just everyday experiences for me are shocking, surprising, funny, amusing, amazing to a lot of Europeans. But again, we're all human beings. We are taught and socialized to believe differences that don't necessarily exist to meet the agenda, someone's agenda for, to achieve and bring about a plan, some plan that does not work for my benefit, which is why I always come down to that, or the beginning and the conclusion of this podcast channel, which is that it's all about the individual. So, what is important to you? How do you even figure out what's important to you? Who are you anyway? What is your racialization? What is your identity? And then how is it that you are going to live in this world? Figure that out, be happy. And the more we do this, the less power government would have because we're going to take care of business ourselves instead of letting corrupt, ignorant people control our lives. And in that process, we'll be happier, we'll be freer, and we'll be able to seek after truth a lot easier. That's it for this episode. I'll talk to you next time.